Hola and greetings, Beyonders. Dave Cruz here with another fantastic show. Today we are speaking with Camille James Harman. And Camille and I met recently at the 2023 UFO Con in South San Francisco, and it was amazing. And I'd just like to thank Camille once again for being on the show for the first time here on Beyond the Strange. Thank you, Camille.
Thank you for having me. It's a very exciting time for me in this field because I had dropped out of the whole UFO thing for since 2013. And I had just started easing myself back into the subject matter around 20, I don't know, last year. I'd say last year. And I started going to meetings again and conferences, and I just got hooked again. I was like, okay, I'm in. There's just so much going on. And what happened is I had gone religious. Long story, but in 2013, I had a born again experience, and I thought the aliens were demons. And I just dropped out and I started going to church, and I still go to church. But now I'm backtracking on that, you know, decision about the aliens being all demons. And I think some of it is demonic and some of it is angelic and some of it is beings in between. So I'm just more open-minded again about the phenomenon. And so I had to get back in because it's just still so interesting to me.
That's awesome. And like you, I've kind of been in and out with the podcast, and I'm just now coming back to the podcast. And so I really appreciate you being on today. And yeah, that's awesome. I've been experienced, with the paranormal for pretty much all my life as well. So I know what you mean, and religion and that kind of thing too, as well. And my whole thing is I try to tie everything together because I believe we're here on this planet. We're experiencing everything for a reason.
I agree. And it is all overlap, it's not separate. It's all
Exactly.
going on. Right.
So let's go ahead and start a little bit with some of your history. And you believe that your abductions started when in your childhood. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I suspect they started in my childhood. I don't have conscious memory of that. When I look back at some of the other abductees, contactees who had childhood experiences, I have the signs of that. I had some childhood trauma, which seems to be very often involved with this experience. I think that when children are traumatized, their awareness is shifted and they're more, I don't know, available to experience things outside the realm of normal because they've already experienced something that people would consider not normal. And it just makes them more open, I think. Or it could be a vulnerability. I mean, you could look at it as a power or a vulnerability. I don't know which, but that also, I had paranormal fears as a child. My fears were not normal fears. They were fears of paranormal things happening to me, fear of my closet. I remember when I was a kid, I had this wig stand in my closet shelf. I don't know why, but it was one of those white styrofoam heads.
Mm-hmm.
And that thing would freak me out. Like if I accidentally tried to go to sleep with the door open, I was like shutting the door, but I don't even know why that thing was in there. I wasn't wearing wigs. I don't know why my mom put that in my closet, but that, and I had a fear of anything reptilian, like the
Yes.
creature from the Black Lagoon.
Oh,
Or
yes.
lizards. Like we had lizards. I grew up in Louisiana. We had these little anoles, and they would come in your house, and you'd have like a lizard on the walls, like. Or when I was young, I used to watch The Land of the Lost on Saturday
Sleep
morning. They
stacks.
had the sleeve sacks. They would freak me out so bad. And that show was trippy. I'm just saying, go back and look at that show.
I agree.
And I had some weird dreams. I had some weird memories of waking up, um, having the feeling that I was just told to take some pills, which is weird. What's another
Hmm.
weird thing? I had really bad nosebleeds and allergies as a kid. I had to have my nose cauterized. I would wake up with nosebleeds all over the pillow. I had these woods next to our house, and I used to walk to my piano teacher's house through the woods to the next street over. And then one day I just wouldn't walk through the woods anymore. And I don't remember why. I don't know if I saw a snake or something scared me. I just know that from then on, mom had to drive me to the piano teacher's house. So that's a maybe. I don't know. I just had certain fears, and I always felt that we aren't alone. Like I always felt watched my whole life. Now you could say
Right.
I feel watched by God or by a guardian angel or whatever, but I always feel like I'm under surveillance. Like I don't know how to explain that, but those are just my clues from the childhood stuff.
Okay.
Another weird thing I should bring up, because some
Yeah.
people have suggested that a lot of contactees, abductees are um, very often related to people that work in the aerospace or military industrial complex, right? And so for a time, I lived with my uncle in Huntsville, Alabama, and he was a rocket scientist under Werner von Braun, okay, back in the 60s when I was there. And he's a mechanical engineer. And I may have been like going to the doctor on the base or whatever. I don't know. This is how your brain works, right? When this happens to you, you start going, why me? Is it because I have green eyes? Is it because I'm Scottish? Is it because my uncle works for NASA? Like you just run all these things through your head, right?
Sure.
When you hear of these stories of um, our government making deals with the beings to abduct people in exchange for technology,
Right.
then you wonder, like, did that put me on a list? Like, am I on a list because my family is NASA? I don't know. I'm not accusing my uncle and NASA. I'm just wondering. So yeah.
That's interesting. Actually, one of my questions was going to be, along with your experience, your past experience, uh, did you ever hear of anything like this in your family tree?
I have. Okay. Now,
That's
of
another
course,
point.
this didn't come before. This came after I had my experiences and I was interrogating my family about this. So I was
Mhm.
like, has this
Sure.
happened to you? Have you had anything paranormal at all happen to you? And I was really wondering. And I asked my NASA uncle, and he said he had an out of body experience while jogging. That was the closest he had. And he said, Camille, if it's true about the aliens, then I don't know anything about it, and it's NSA, and they're never going to tell you. So you should just get over it. I was like,
Mm,
that's a lot. Um,
yeah.
and okay, so my mother, my birth mom, said she was meditating once, and she felt like there were giant claws on her shoulder. I was like, okay, that's a sign, kind of.
Yeah.
Then my adopted mom, her sister, they're all three siblings because I was adopted by my aunt. Okay, my adopted mom, my aunt, um, she had a weird experience once. We all went to see Close Encounters of the Third Kind when we were kids at the theater, and so we get in the car to go home, and she's sitting in the car and she won't start the car. She's like all emotional. And she looks at us and she said, I just want you to know, if the spaceship comes, I'm going. And we three kids were like, I was raised with her kids. They're my cousins technically.
Right.
And we're like, oh my God, okay, mom, thanks. Wow, gee whiz. And then later, years later, I was at a Bashar meeting. This guy who channels Bashar, who's this
Yep.
alleged alien from the future, right?
Yep.
And I asked Bashar about that, and he said what she really meant was, when the spaceship comes, I go, and it comes and I go, and it comes and I go. And I was like, oh my God. So basically he was saying she's already in the program. She's having experiences and doesn't know it. So my family tolerates this whole phenomenon about me. Oh, and then when my grandmother, their mother, was in the hospital,
Hmm.
was in and out of the hospital a lot when she was old, right? When she was having various problems. And at one point, she said she was seeing aliens in the hospital, and she was
Mm.
very freaked out. And they had to call for her Presbyterian minister to come and comfort her and pray with her at the hospital. And they were all mad at me. They're like, you put ideas in her head. Now she's hallucinating aliens. And I'm like, I don't know, maybe she's really seeing aliens, and the anesthesia or whatever, the drugs made her able to see them. I don't know.
Right. Right.
Maybe. So I don't know. So I do think there's stuff on my maternal side, possibly.
Yeah. Definitely sounds like it for sure. And if you dig even more, you might find it might even go farther past your mom.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be surprised. So along with this experience, I'm guessing later you have done some hypnosis regression, and
Yes.
that was with Barbara Lamb and Yvonne Smith, who was also at
Yes.
the UFO Con. Great presenter, by the way, and yours also. If I didn't say that yet, I loved your presentation.
Oh, thanks.
So, so yeah, so Barbara Lamb. Mhm.
Yeah, I worked with Barbara a few times, I think 3 times, and then I worked with Yvonne 1 time. I'm currently in Yvonne's Zero group right now, so I'm interacting with other contactees again and catching up on everything. It's really fun. Um, yeah, so my conscious experience is very limited. I'm not one of those people who has aliens materializing in the room. And I don't even know if they're aliens. So let me just qualify that and just
Sure.
say beings. I'm kind of like Whitley Strieber on that. I'm like, I don't know what they are. I don't know if I trust them, even if they told me what they are. I have had very scary medical procedure experiences, right? And I've had ecstatic out of body light being experiences. So, you know, it's hard for me to say, like, I would love more of that. The ecstatic oneness, light being, but the
Right.
scary on the table stuff, no, no, thank you. I don't, unless they're healing me, but that's a maybe. Still, it's scary. Um, so the only thing I had consciously happening to me, and I mean, we could get into my PowerPoint at this point. It's your option, but um, basically that started when I was in my late 20s living in Los Angeles. So I
Hmm.
had a totally normal life up till then, basically as far as the paranormal stuff, I had nothing happen to me that I knew of. And I was compelled to buy this Whitley Strieber book at the bookstore one day. I'm one of those people, you
Right.
hear these stories all the time where they see the book and they're like, "Oh, must buy this book." And then you take it to the cash.
Compelled.
And
Yeah.
it was like that. And it was 1995 and it wasn't Communion. It was one of the later books. And I read it and was blown away. Like it was my great awakening, right? It was like, and I just was obsessed. I was like, oh my God, this is real. And this is serious. And then right after that, I moved to LA. So my boyfriend and I moved to LA and um, everything's great. Like I had no problems in my life. I had an agent. We were both actors. Okay. I had an agent, I had a day job, I had my SAG card. I was like hot stuff. I'm like, I'm gonna, arrive to LA and my career is gonna take off and everything's gonna be great. So I had all these high hopes and everything was lined up for that. Right.
Mhm.
And then I started having these weird feelings. Like we moved in September 95 and I I started having anxiety and my period disappeared and I was having like all these weird bodily symptoms of being pregnant, which was weird. I was on the pill at the time,
Mhm.
and in the past I'd had that where I'd be late, but I was on the pill. Like, but I would go to the store and I'd get a pregnancy test, and I would take it and it'd be negative, and I'd be like, okay, good. And but for some reason this time I didn't do that. Like I put it off, which is weird. That alone is weird. And
Okay.
this went on until like it was December now, and I still had no period. And then in December '95, just a few months after moving to LA, I was walking the dog with my boyfriend and we saw a UFO in broad daylight over Silver Lake neighborhood in Los Angeles. And um, I was very excited and he was mocking me. He was like, "Oh, it's a UFO. Aren't you happy because you've been reading those books?" And I said, "Here, hold the leash." And I ran home to report it to MUFON because they actually were in
Okay.
the phone book. Like they had the yellow pages back then, right? And it
Oh
said
yeah, yeah.
UFO hotline. And I was like, bingo. And they said, great, we'll take your report. And what we had seen, we saw this, I want to say it was a black triangle, but I'm not quite sure. It was super high up. It was black, but it had like a shimmer around it, like a plasma field or some kind of indistinguishable outline.
Okay.
And it was not moving. And the only reason we looked up was because our dog had seen this squirrel run up a palm tree, and there was like a whole nest of squirrels up there, and she was freaking out, and we were laughing and looking up at the nest of squirrels. And behind the palm tree was this thing in a bright blue sky. So, and we had it for scale, like with the palm tree, like we knew it wasn't moving. It was stationary. And then while we were looking at each other, and I said, I think it is a UFO, and I'm going to go report it. And I handed the leash to him to go home early.
Right.
And we looked back and it was gone.
Right.
And I'm like, where'd it go? Where'd it go? And he's like, oh my God. So, it was weird. And that was my first sighting. Woohoo. I've had many, many, many since then, but that was the first. So
Right.
I started going to these MUFON meetings. And if you want me to jump into my presentation at this point, it'd probably be good. It gets kind of visual. So we could do that.
Let me see what I have as far as, yeah, we can.
Okay, let me do that.
Because I can ask you questions while we're in the presentation as well.
Okay, so I'm going to put my glasses on. I'm going to blast through this to catch up to where I was. So here's my boyfriend and I at the time. We were having a good old time living in New Orleans, and we were going to Anne Rice balls, and we were going to Mardi Gras balls, and life was great. And I was in grad school getting my master's in theater. So that's the book that I bought on the shelf, okay? The one that I was compelled to buy. This was our house where it all happened. This is in Silver Lake, California, in LA, rather. It's a neighborhood in LA. And we had this great view of the sky. Here's me walking the dog. That's just a sample of, our little dog and the neighborhood we lived in. Now, let me get to this story. So I had gone to the MUFON meetings. I started going because I thought that would be really fun. And this woman spoke. Her name is Kim Carlsberg, and she'd made this book with Daryl Anka, who did the illustrations. And Kim was also in the entertainment industry. She was the photo, wait, what do you call it? She was the set photographer for the show Baywatch, and she was dating the producer of Baywatch, or the director, I can't remember. But she lived in Malibu in a really nice house on the beach. And she started having these abductions, like aliens coming through the walls while she was awake. And it was very scary. And she was, having hybrid babies and all that weird stuff. And it was very disruptive to her life, as you might imagine. And as she gave her talk, I could feel myself resonating with her experience. Like, I was like, oh my God, I think I'm one of these people. Like, I just knew it. You just know something, even though it seems so weird.
Yeah.
That happened to me. So I went to her table in the back, and I was flipping through the book, and it had this checklist in the back, like, you might have been abducted if, and then has all these things. And I'm going through it. I'm like, oh my God, I have like 85% of these symptoms. Oh my God, Oh, so Barbara Lamb was there, and I got introduced to her, and I said, I have something I would like to target. Oh, I forgot to tell you. So what had happened, this whole time period of moving to LA and seeing the craft in December. So in that same time period, I woke up one night while Eric was watching a movie in the living room, and I had the sleep paralysis, right?
Mm.
And I couldn't move. And I heard this voice say my name in my ear, like a mechanical voice. Freaked me out because, I've never heard voices, never before, never since, actually. But I was like frozen in my bed and I couldn't move. And I heard this little mechanical voice say, "Come," in my ear. And I was like, so then he came to sleep, and it happened again in the same night. And I remember coming out of it moaning, and he was like, it woke him up, because when you come out of sleep paralysis, sometimes you can't move, and the first thing you can move is your voice. And I was like,
that's exactly right. I know, I felt that. I've experienced it before. I'll tell you that later. Please continue.
See? So that's what I wanted to target with Barbara. And then there was also another weird thing that had happened in Virginia when I lived there a few years before, where I had woken up from a dream that had some satanic imagery in it. And in this dream, I was very frightened, and I felt something pulling my soul out of me through my solar plexus, like a vacuum. Mm-hmm. In my dream state, I said, stop in the name of Jesus Christ. And it stopped. And then I woke up and then I heard wind chimes. It was the weirdest experience. So we targeted both those things in my first session. And I got beings in both, by the way. So, but I want to skip to the one that was regarding the house in Silver Lake where the sleep paralysis happened, because I got the sensation of this blue light appearing over me. And well, it changed colors. It was purple and orange, and then it became blue. And it was like I want to say it was like a column of light in a way. It seemed to, when it hit me, I seemed to curl into a fetal position and go through the ceiling. That's how I felt in this memory. And then I unfolded and I was flat in another room on some kind of table with white misty light all around me. This is under hypnosis. Okay, now let me just distinguish. I did not remember anything consciously but the sleep paralysis and the voice. Under hypnosis with Barbara, I had the light and the white room, or I wouldn't have white room, the white misty light room. Okay, so I'm on the table. So I'm terrified and I'm screaming in the regression. My teeth are chattering. I'm like freaking out. And she's asking me to look around, and I'm like, I don't want to look around. They're all looking at me. And she goes, who's looking at you? And I look over there and I see this row of beings. Let me jump ahead. Sorry, because I have
No problem.
I see these guys. Okay. Here's
Okay.
So, this misty white light with these beings that were tall and thin that all looked alike, and they had long arms. They had they had white robes on with like a high collar, big black eyes. And then this being I could not distinguish. Somehow my knees opened without my permission. And I said, I have a baby in me and they want to take it out.
Oh God.
And so then I saw a flash of this speculum, like, medical device thing. And I was like, oh my God, I was losing it.
Right.
And Barbara said, you can go out of your body and watch it from above in the memory. And I was like, oof. So I go up above and they take this little something out of me that looks like a very tiny fetus, for lack of a, better description. Yeah. I didn't see it clearly because it was in this instrument. It wasn't like, like this. It was like in something. It was like a pink blob. And then they walk out of the room with it, or the being walks out of the room. And I'm just crying and I'm all bereft. And like, they didn't even let me see it. I'm just crying and freaking out. And then I come out of that hypnosis. So, I mean, what do you do with that, right? It's like, holy crap. Now, what's weird is in January, after that experience, my periods came back just like normal. So there you have it. It correlated with physical thing in my body.
Yeah.
And so back in the day, she was using cassettes, right? So I go home with this cassette tape and I play it for my boyfriend. And he's like, I mean, you could see his face was like, our lives will never be the same. I mean, what do you do when your girlfriend comes home with something like that? So
sure.
It took over my life. I had to, of course, tell my family. I became obsessed with this phenomenon. And I wanted to learn everything I could. It just seemed so real. And everybody that tried to talk me out of it with very logical arguments, like, well, you must have had an abortion and you're having some screen memory, guilt thing, whatever, over that. I said, that would actually maybe make sense, but I've never had an abortion. So
right.
For that theory, like nothing made sense. Right. And fast forward to this summer, my boyfriend, he went out of town to do a shoot actually back in New Orleans. And I was sleeping alone and I woke up at, let me go click here. I woke up 3 mornings in a row. Oh, I had this mysterious thing on my shoulder happen. I woke up from a dream of a bee sting. I'm sorry. I woke up from a dream of a spider biting me. That was the dream. But then when I was awake, I would get this bee sting feeling on this spot of my shoulder. And it would send a shoot of electricity, like a jolt of electricity down my arm. And it was a very weird thing. And it would just randomly happen, And I later met a guy at a party and he said he could clear people of things like this. And he worked on me and he made it stop. It never happened again. But anyway, I had other weird things. Here was a grid mark on my shoulder. You see this kind of square?
Yeah.
That was weird.
That's
Um,
interesting.
but okay, here's the story. So he's out of town, and I wake up in the bed at 4 a.m, sharp, looking at the clock and going, why am I awake? I didn't hear anything. It happened 3 times in a row. And the third morning, I got in the tub to shave because I was going to meet my friend at the beach. I was going to shave my legs. And I had this like fresh wound on my calf of 3 puncture wounds in the shape of a like in the shape of a triangle. So it's like a
Triangle.
triangle on my calf of needle pricks. And I took a picture of it. And I said, I know this is an alien thing. And I started looking through books and
That's common.
videos, and I found it. Yeah, other
Yeah.
people have had it. Now, I since lost that picture because I sent it to Dr. Lear and I didn't get it back. But here's a friend of mine who had it. And see, he had it on his wrist and it looked just
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
So that's what it looked like. But I lost my picture. It's so irritating. Now, I sent it to Dr. Lear and I filled out a questionnaire, and he said that I scored very high probability of being an abductee. And I was going to work with him, but then I was recommended to another doctor, and we did a regression with Yvonne Smith, by the way. Okay, so what happened here is, this is what I remembered. So again, it was the tall beings with the white robes, and then there were these 3 little lumpy guys. They had lumpy heads, like wrinkly heads. I couldn't really see them, but they were like there were 2 at my head and 1 at my left leg, and then this guy was at my right leg. And he
Mhm.
pulled this instrument down from the ceiling, and he held my leg and he popped it in. And it was like, I don't know what it was. I mean, I don't know what it did. I just, I don't think it was an implant. I think it was like an inoculation or something. I don't know, or I don't know what it was anyway. But I was very frightened. And this being at one point, even though I started out describing him as a gray, I guess, right?
Mhm.
The big bug eyes. At one point he morphed and he had antenna in my memory. So I don't know if those were
Mantis.
real. I don't know if he was a mantis in
Mhm.
disguise. I don't know. Hypnosis is so weird. You don't know what your
Right.
memory is really. You just do your best. So I don't know if he was a mantis or a gray, but it was scary. And I've always been afraid of praying mantises as a kid as well. They were all also on my list of scary things. So, anyway, let's go on. So, what happened next? Oh, so that was 1997 when that happened. And I also went to the Roswell 50th anniversary event, which was really fun. And I'm sorry, this was in 1996, the event. The next year was the Roswell event. And I saw all the greats, of the old days, the 90s, all these guys were there. It was so
Yeah.
much fun. I went
It's a
to
good
the
lineup right there.
site. It was amazing. I met John Mack. I met
Mhm.
everyone. It was just so memorable and wonderful. Um, on the way home, we stopped at White Sands. Okay. Now I was traveling with Don Waldrop, who was the state section director of MUFON, or at least the Los Angeles section director back in the day. And so we pull over at White Sands, and he had a good camera, and he said, go run around on the hills and I'll take pictures of you. So I'm on the dunes and I draw this big alien face. And I was yelling at the sky, like, I dare you to come down here, you bastards. And I'm screaming at them. And then when we got the pictures developed, there was this white little light thing, this little thing that appeared where I was looking in the pictures
Mhm.
when I was doing this. I thought that was really cool. I have other pictures in the sand dunes that day where I wasn't yelling at the aliens and I wasn't standing on that face, and there were no weird light images in those pictures, only in these 2 where I was yelling at the sky. So that was kind of cool. I don't know what that was.
You don't remember seeing anything when you were doing that?
No, it just showed up in the picture.
Interesting.
Yeah, that happens to me a lot. Okay. So then I had a weird experience. This is regarding a tooth issue, and I had a dentist write this up, and all this is on the right is I retyped what he wrote in the letter because it's hard to read his handwriting if you're in a presentation. But so I had all my fillings changed out to the white ones because I was an actress, and I wanted to look good, and not have the mercury in my filling, in the old fillings in my teeth. So I had all these changed out by this Beverly Hills dentist, who's now in Las Vegas, by the way. And they were great. They looked great. They all felt great, except there was one tooth up here that I had some pain, like sensitivity to cold and salad dressing, and So I went back to him and I said, they were all great except this one. This one's bothering me. And he said, well, give it more
Mm.
time. And anyway, I kept coming back to him. I was like, it still hurts. And so he dug out my filling and he found this spherical, or he said half spherical object that was super hard, that was in my tooth. And he said, this is not your old filling. I would have seen it when I put this in. Like, this is something weird. And I had told him, I had said, if you ever find anything weird in my body, you have to tell me, because I am an alien abductee. And also I told him that because I had read that a lot of abductees freak out in the dentist chair because they have flashbacks to being, laying down with stuff coming out of the ceiling at them, exactly like what happened to me. So I said, if I ever like wig out in the dentist chair, that would be wise. So just
Mm.
heads up.
Sure.
And it was really nice. And he said, okay, I read a book about Roswell. I don't know, whatever. But then when he found this thing in my tooth, he's like, wow, you really had something in there. So he drilled it out as best he could. But it was really hard. And then he just repacked it. And so whatever he did to it, fixed it. Like, it didn't hurt anymore after that. Later, when I met a doctor who was from the Navy, who was recommended to me by MUFON, he wanted me to have my tooth pulled
Okay.
for them to examine. And I was like, no, I don't want to pull my tooth. I'm sorry. I didn't want to do that.
Right.
So I don't know if there's part of that still in there. I did do a regression to it though. And I will tell you, this is what I remembered. Okay. So this was a regression with Barbara Lamb. And in this regression, which very mysteriously had a defective recording, and I have no record of this regression, unfortunately, very weird.
Okay.
But what I recalled, I thought I was going to get aliens, right? Because I had before. And so we just targeted, how did Camille get this object in her tooth? And what I recalled was coming to on a table in an exam room with humans in it. And the humans were wearing lab coats and they had khaki pants, like military, with the black dress shoes, right? And they took a syringe and they squirted it into my jaw through my cheek. And they were calling me a troublemaker.
Ouch.
And I felt very drugged. Okay. So, like, the difference between this memory and the alien memories was very stark, because in the alien memories, whatever those are, the aliens, I felt super alert. I was immobilized, but I was super awake. I was like hyper awake. Right. And with
Mm.
this memory, I felt like totally drugged, like I was barely able to function. So that's different to me. And then they rolled me down a hallway and they put me in a black helicopter, and the ceiling opened up and they flew me up into the blue sky and brought me home and put me down near my house in a field and said, go home and take a nap. Okay. So I came out of that regression, and Barbara told me that was her first military abduction regression ever, by the way. And her recording didn't work, which is weird.
Mm. That is weird.
So I was so angry when I came out of that, because there was something about, like, holy cow, if that's true and that's been going on with me as well, and I didn't remember that until I was regressed, then what the hell else has happened to me that I don't remember that could be related to that kind of scenario? Like, it's bad enough for the aliens, but when it's humans, you feel this betrayal and fear that's very different.
Oh yeah.
So I was pissed. Okay. So that happened. I don't know what to make of that. I'm just telling you guys that's part of the phenomenon as well.
Right.
Next thing. Oh, this was the best though. Here comes the good part.
Look
This
like
is when
orbs.
I had the good aliens or beings or whatever you want to call them. So
Mhm.
through this all, I had this weird longing, like, for other beings, right? And I started catching myself talking like, oh, humans, they're so this, they're so that. And I thought, why am I talking like that? Like, who am I siding with in my subconscious that, it can't be those things that had me on the table, because those things scared me. Right. And I said, Barbara, can I target this like feeling of longing for some beings that I don't recall? And she said, yeah, let's do it. So I go under, and first memory I had was I had this total panic attack about being in my body. I was screaming, I don't want to be here in this body. It's so weak. It's so, I felt like a claustrophobia panic attack. And
Mhm.
I had the feeling that I was the size of, like, the only way to describe it, I was the size of a sofa being stuffed into a pillowcase. And I was,
Mm. That's a good visual.
and then she said, well, go to a place or a time where you felt happy and, not like that, whatever she said. I can't remember exactly. So I go poof, and I'm out in space. Okay. And out in space, I'm this blue light being. And I'm looking around and I see Earth spinning really fast. And I see these two other light blobs that I recognize as my friends here on Earth. And I'm like, oh, seeing my two friends. And I'm all emotional and I'm looking at Earth and I don't want to go to Earth. And it's like being on the edge of a diving board. And she said, well, why do you have to go to Earth? And I said, I don't know. She said, well, ask someone, see if there's someone you can ask. So I asked, why do I have to go to Earth? And then this white light being appears. And this being is like pure love. And it's like an ecstatic, angelic merging. I'm just crying, like they're my home. I mean, I'm just going off on joy. Like I had this
Right.
pure ecstatic experience with these beings. And it was so awesome. And I'm like, why do I have to go to Earth? And
Mhm.
they said, because the Earth needs you. And I said, why? And they said, to fight evil. And I was like, oh, okay. How do I do that? And they said, tell people we exist and that we love them. And I was like, okay, what am I supposed to do? Lecture about you? And they said, no, you're supposed to act. And I said, but there's so much made that's crap and I don't know about that. And and they said, we will set it up so that you meet people. Wait, how do they say it? We will set it up so that you make projects worthy of your time. I was like, okay, please, please twist my arm, right? And so they showed me this image of like a light source coming through them and then going like out towards Earth. And it was like they were shining love at us, like rays. And they said, we're always here, but you guys are walking around with umbrellas. And then they gave me the image of everyone on Earth had an umbrella up and they couldn't get through the umbrella at us. It was like a video game. And I thought that's such a beautiful image. And you know, anyway, they were so awesome. And I just felt like they were very real and they were either angelic. I didn't ask them like, what are you? What do I call you? I didn't ask them that. So
Right.
but anyway, I just felt like so happy and at one and everything was like merged. And anyway, I'll image of them when I was a child at my crib, like like holding my hand as an infant and then withdrawing it and feeling like, no, 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 like panic, like they had to separate for me to have this experience or something. So
Mm.
I do think, you know, since childhood, something's been going on. Anyway, um, and what's weird is right after that, the next thing that I got as an acting job was a movie called The Encounter about a man who has an angelic encounter, right? So I thought that was really cool. So already
So
like, they were doing what they said, like setting it up so I would make projects worthy of my time. Now, not every project I've done has been worthy of my time, still trying to have a career and make some money, but I have been a little bit cautious about the projects I choose and things, but
mhm.
uh, so that happened. So it's not like there are other dimensional beings out there and we don't quite understand, you know, why we have experiences with some and others and what that all means on a subconscious level or vibration level. Or I think it has to do with your vibration, but I think it also has to do with your soul and contracts or something. uh,
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Let me
so
ask you really quick though before we
yeah,
move on.
Yeah,
Have you had that sensation since then?
I have not. Um, I pray.
Hmm.
I did have an experience recently that I was going to show you that is coming
Hmm.
up.
Hmm.
Um, because I've had a big shift in the last few months, and I
Okay.
did catch some UFOs possibly on video that I want to show that might be related to these guys. I don't know, but I'm open to them. Obviously, I mean, who wouldn't be open to having that experience again?
Oh, that'd be, yeah, amazing.
Levels, like whether in a dream or whether consciously or whether in hypnosis. That was life changing. That experience.
Yeah.
Both.
And
I mean, both the bad and the good were life changing, but the life changing oneness and unity experience. I mean, that some people are in meditation for years to have that kind of experience.
sure. Yeah,
So
absolutely. Okay, please.
we'll get to it.
Um,
Okay, so next thing that happened in my story, just so you know, so I went to England to see the crop circles because I was so into the crop circles, and I was also obsessed with the rock star Sting, and he
yes.
lives, he lives in this house right next to Stonehenge, and so I thought, great, I can go look at Sting's house and Stonehenge and crop circles all in the same trip, and Barbara Lamb was there too.
That's cool.
So I went part of the trip I was alone, and then I met up with Barbara, and she said, okay, we're going to this brand new crop circle that just appeared last night. And so we get to this crop circle, and it was my first one, right? And because some people say that they feel like the beings that make the crop circles sometimes do shapes that are responding to your consciousness. Like they
Yes.
have groups that meditate on certain shapes and that shape will appear. So this is what happened to me. So there it is. There's my first crop circle. This is a photo by Lucy Pringle, and it was called the Stingray. Now, what are the odds that I'm
Yeah.
obsessed with Sting? And then the first crop circle I get to go in is called the Stingray. Isn't that,
There's a synchro.
isn't that? And there's Barbara. That's a picture of Barbara in there. It was kind of drizzly that day, but it was still awesome. This was 1998, by the way. So I had a good old time. We stayed in this beautiful B&B. I met this guy, Lee. We had a little fling. That's us in a crop circle. And he had a black Ferrari. So we're driving around crop circle country in a black Ferrari. It was really fun, right? So I home to my boyfriend, the same boyfriend that I was with since New Orleans. And I said, I had a fling, and we were engaged. I mean, I was so bad. We'd been together 7 years. We were engaged. And he said, I'm so glad you had a fling. I was hoping you would because I wanted to break up, but I love you and I didn't want to be the bad guy.
Totally the opposite, right?
This really nice, amicable breakup. And we actually had a disengagement party and invited all our same friends that had come to the engagement party. And we broke up. And we ended up going to each other's weddings. So, it worked out. But then I met this guy.
Mhm.
So um yeah, my current
Nice.
my current husband, like I'm gonna have another. No, my husband right now that I've had for since a long time ago, years and years, 2 decades. So right after my England trip, I was getting gas at the gas station, and this guy was getting gas right next to me on a motorcycle, and I had this bumper sticker that said "I love England," and he asked me, "What part of England do you love?" And I'm like, Wiltshire. I was just in Wiltshire looking at crop circles. And I'm thinking, he's not going to know what I'm talking about. But he did. And he said, oh, my friend Jim Dilatoso showed me a video of UFOs making a crop circle. And I was like, Jim Dilatoso? I was impressed. That was like name dropping in the UFO world.
Right.
And and he goes, what got you into UFOs? And I said, well, they got into me. And he's like, oh, yeah, I had trouble with them in Wisconsin when I was growing up. And I was
Hmm.
like, what? And so we're swapping stories. And Jeff had all these weird experiences up in Wisconsin
Right.
on his own
Hmm.
up there. And he was chased by a UFO that stalled his bike once, and he had to sleep at the neighbors. And then the next morning he started it up fine. He used to see them coming out of the lake, and he lived way, way up, like cold Wisconsin, Eagle River. And he said he saw a Sasquatch too up there once. Anyway, so Jeff had his own weird experiences. So we swapped cards, and then we had a date. And he's an astrologer, so he brought his laptop to our first date, and he typed me in. and, see if I was crazy or, see if we were compatible. And here we are. So yeah, that was in 1998. So, Jeff and I have common. Um, we even had our house dust analyzed. There was a researcher, Marilyn Rubin. These people, they studied crop circles, but we actually had samples of our house dust sent to them because they were finding these weird microspheres and these weird objects in people's house dust that had been abducted. And we had that in our house. So there you have that. And Jeff was able to look at my astrology. He does the Vedic and he also does tropical. And he said, well, you had these progressions going on in 95 when all that happened that are very much aligned with discovering something in the subconscious coming forward. Like, the fact that you became aware of your abduction experiences during that
Right.
time, late 95, he said you had a progressed moon in the 12th house, you had a Saturn in the 12th house, and both of those things were signifying that. And then I started writing for UFO magazine, which was really fun. I wrote for UFO magazine from 2000 to 2004, and I got to meet all these MUFON speakers. I covered the MUFON meetings. I wrote other articles too, but it gave me, VIP status with a lot of speakers, and I got to exchange emails with them and get their
Hmm.
photos and everything to put the articles together. I got interviewed by the LA Times with John Mack. And I was out of the closet. I was doing some media. I was doing some shows, I didn't care. Now here's a picture of my family. We talked earlier about what is it in my DNA or something,
Right.
but this is my birth mom. This is my adopted mom and my Uncle Jack from NASA, and they're all siblings. Okay. So I don't know. His daughter, my cousin, who's about my age, she works for NASA as well. Then I moved to Arizona. So anyway, we moved to Arizona for 10 years, Jeff and I, and our son. We had a son.
Hmm.
It was great. I mean, there was a really strong MUFON meeting there. A lot of old timers from the UFO early days were based in Tucson. And Wendell Stevens, Colonel Wendell Stevens, who wrote tons of books on the Pleiadians and other things, he lived there. He was going to the MUFON meetings. Robert Dean. It was really fun. Like UFO history is in Arizona, a lot of it. So had a great time living there and enjoying the scenery. The only thing I didn't like was the rattlesnakes and the
Of
scorpions.
course. Sure.
And I visited Sedona with my mom. Now, I don't know if you can see in this picture, we were snapping pictures of this cliff, and this weird thing showed up when we downloaded them. So we did not see this at the time. I'll show you the next frame.
Looks like an orb.
Well, it has this
Or actually, no.
line on the bottom, and then this blur here, and then a red light on top. So
Yeah,
pretty trippy, huh?
Something else. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know what that was, but I was with my mom and this woman who married me and Jeff, Raven de Lumiere, who's also a contactee. And my mom and I had been doing a Drunvalo Melchizedek workshop in Sedona at the time. So we got that cool picture. I don't remember who actually took it. I don't know it was before cell phones. So somebody had a camera. I think my mom took it actually. But then years later, it was around 2012. There was all this hype about the end of the Mayan calendar, right? And
right.
I felt very let down by that hype. Jeff, to his credit, was saying there's nothing I see in the astrology about this 2012 thing. He said, I see it hitting the fan in 2019, 2020. The end of 2019, 2020 was when he said everything would get crazy. And he was right, because I was COVID. So anyway, Jeff and I visited this Chapel of the Holy Cross Catholic Church in Sedona. And I had this feeling like I really missed certain aspects of going to church, because I had been very new age, right?
Okay.
Astrologer, was into aliens, all that. And I had, shortly after that, I had like this, I was writing my book, which I never finished, about the alien stuff. And I got to the end and I was like, I still don't know what this was. I mean, I don't want to end my book with some kind of, I don't want to lead anyone astray with my theories. I want to know. And I made this prayer, like, God, please reveal to me what this was so I can get on with my life. And the feelings that came over me over time, and there were some books that fell into my reality that, you know how when you just see books at the bookstore, I had this book, Gray Aliens and the Harvesting of Soul. And it was
Hmm.
very eye-opening. And he was speculating, this author, Nigel Kerner, that when you die, these beings try to capture your soul,
Mhm.
keep you like in some kind of cycle. I don't know if he meant reincarnation. I'd have to reread the book. It's been a while. But he also talked a lot about Jesus and the Shroud of Turin, and how Jesus left this imprint on the shroud that they cannot figure out with science. They don't know how this, like, it's almost like he left a radiation imprint on the shroud.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
It's very wild. So I just had this awakening. I was like, I had this born again Jesus experience that was super powerful. And I just thought, you know, are these aliens demons? Like, am I just spinning my wheels, wasting my time? Like, seriously. And I got this
Uh,
feeling that aliens were demons. And I went with it. And I went back to church, and I just dropped out of everything. And I just, I think I threw out the baby with the bathwater, but
mhm.
I don't regret it. I mean, it was just like a detour. It was like a detour, right? And it was lovely because I just immersed myself in a whole other thing, like
Right.
super. I was reading the Bible. I was reading all these books about religion, and I was reading about exorcism and like the parallels between demonic experiences and abduction experiences and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's intriguing. I mean, you
Yeah.
can't ignore that stuff. So that's what I did. I'm still going to church. I'm going to church Sunday. I might go today. It's Good Friday. Or, I don't know. Um, I actually started going to church in Tucson, and one of the most educational things about it is studying the lives of the saints and their mystical experiences, and how, because when you have a mystical experience, like in that framework of the saints, they go to the priest and say, hey, this is what I'm hearing, this is what I'm experiencing, and then they sort through it, and they put it to the test to see if it's demonic or from God, right? And so they have a protocol for that, which I found very interesting and useful, actually. And but then there's also the church clamping down on the mystical experience and putting it in the context of the church, right? So it's like if it veers outside of that, then that's a problem. So then you wonder, like, how many people are editing their experiences to fit in with what the church would approve,
Right.
and how much, you just wonder,
Well,
like,
it
yeah,
seems to me that the church has really been embracing a lot of ufology
yeah,
over the last few years.
yeah. So they're
So
open-minded. Their biggest question is, if the other beings' history, if they don't have a story like we have a story of the whole fall of man and the Garden of Eden and the sin and the redemption, if they don't have that story, then what is their story and how does Christianity apply to it, right?
right. Mhm.
So they're like, do they need Jesus? Do they need redemption? Is Jesus's power over the whole universe? Like, what does that mean to these other beings? Like, how do we put all that together in our brains? So it's a very interesting conversation, and I will leave that to the experts. But I think Jesus is king. So that's just what I think. So anyway, and then we moved back to LA. So I had all this born again religious thing going on. And Jeff was like, I want to go back to LA. And I was like, okay. So we go back to LA. And I thought, well, I'll start acting again because why not? I'm here.
Yep.
So I started acting again, and it really took off. I was in this Oscar-winning film, Vice,
Right.
with Christian Bale,
Great
about
movie.
Dick Cheney. I was in a movie about Dick Cheney.
Mm-hmm.
And so I played Mary Madeline, and it was fun. I mean, I did a bunch of things, and my career got going again. And then the COVID lockdowns happened, and that happened. And then the stupid mandates kicked in, and I won't take the shot. So that screwed up my career for the past couple of years, but it's going away now. The mandates are ending in May. So I'll be able to do the big productions again. I've been doing little stuff for the past couple of years because of that tyranny. Um, and then I got into Tartaria, which is a whole other thing. And
So
then I started going to UFO conferences again. This is me at the UFO Congress.
That's awesome.
You know, I'm almost at the end of my thing here. And then my other mom, stepmom, I didn't even talk about her. She flew in to visit me and my sister, and she caught a UFO from the plane. And I
That's
picked her up at the
amazing.
airport at Orange County, at John Wayne Airport. And she's like, "Oh my God, Camille, I saw UFOs from the plane with my seatmate. We watched them for 5 minutes and I got a picture." And she said, "I didn't believe, and now I believe. And I'm so excited that you're picking me up." And so, yeah, I said, "Why didn't you press video?" But she saw three orbs floating around each other for 5 minutes. They watched them. So there was a big white one and two little ones, um, like circling around each other over California right before they landed, actually, over the desert in
Mhm.
California. And then here we get to my thing. So this is the end of my part about the aliens. So I had been at church in February praying, and I said, and my church is outside. It's a long story, but we're in a tent. And I was looking at the sky. I was sitting kind of in the back where I could see the sky. And I said, "Okay, God, I'm about to give a talk about UFOs again. I'm so nervous because I don't know if this is making you mad or happy or what." And I said, "Dear Jesus, I- if you are working with any good beings that are in UFOs, please give me a sign, because I'm excited about doing this, but I don't want to do it if it's wrong. Like, I'm trying to do the right thing."
Right.
I look up at the sky in the middle of mass and I see these four things flying around, and I whip out my camera and I start videotaping them. So that was pretty awesome. Um, I can show that right now. I believe this will work if I press play. I'm not sure how to do this actually. Oh, here it is. Do you want me to try it? We'll see if it works.
Sure. Yeah.
Now, they're going to appear at the top of the screen, and it's really hard to see until I zoom in, and I will zoom in shortly. It's a very short clip. So here we go. So I'm zoomed in. They start flying around like that. You see them in the top part of the screen? I hope you can
Yes.
see.
Yeah.
Kind of hard. And then I got shy. Guys, see, I'm so mad at myself, but I was embarrassed that I was filming in the middle of mass because there were people sitting behind me, right? And
It was
I
the middle of
don't want them to
mass.
get
Yeah.
distracted. Like, why is she filming the sky? And I just got really self-conscious, so I stopped. I should have kept going though.
That's
Um,
understandable.
so yeah, so that happened. And then I met Chris Bledsoe, and I had this real connection with him. I had read his book, and then we had been talking on the phone, and then he showed up at Alien Con in Pasadena, and I got
Mhm.
to he just really hit it off. And he looked at my video and he said, "Camille, those were angels." I was like, "What?" And he said, "Yes, they were angels." And he's having really extraordinary experiences. Everybody should read his book. He's incredible. He's in North Carolina, and I just love, love, love him. So, and my husband interviewed him on a podcast too. So Jeff analyzed his astrology,
Mhm.
and found out some really interesting things. So Chris is kind of like my mentor right now because he came from a Christian background and he's dealing with these phenomena. And he's like, "Camille, it's of God. And there are good beings that are helping you, that are in the form of these orbs and all these things." And he said, just, when you pray, say, "God, I'm willing to have interactions with these beings." And he said, "Don't be afraid." And I'm like, "Okay." So I started praying. I was like praying and saying, "Okay, God, I'm ready to work with the good beings and angels, whatever they are that want to work with me. But I am still kind of scared. So can you come to me in my dreams right now? Because if you appear to me in person, like, I can handle UFOs because they're far away. But
Yeah.
if you show up in person in my conscious state, I might have a heart attack." So shortly after that, I had a dream where these beings approached me and were in my bed. It was weird because I was sleeping in the guest room, and I
Right.
never did that. But Jeff was having a problem, and it was keeping me awake at night. And so I said, "I'm going in the guest room." And while I was in there, I had this dream in the guest room, in my dream,
Okay.
of beings, of something touching the back of my neck. And I was so scared, like, "Oh my God, are you here?" Like, holy cow. And I said, "Are you here to heal me?" Anyway, so I turn and I look and I see these, but they were human looking. There were these two faces of men,
Mhm.
And they were very neutral. They weren't smiling or frowning or telepathic or anything. I just saw these two faces of men. And then I woke up. So I asked Chris, I was like, oh my God, Chris, what do you think? Do you think that was real? Because it happened in the guest room. In my dream, I was in the guest room, and I was actually in the guest room. It seemed kind of maybe real. And he said, probably. He said, maybe they, did to make you go in the guest room so they could interact with you. Anyway, so
That's something to think about. Yeah.
So I'm wondering if it's happening again now, but as long as it's not too scary and it's okay with God, I'm okay with it. I hate to be such a chicken, but I don't want to get myself in trouble, but I also don't want to cut myself off from anything good. You get that, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I feel we're in a time where a lot more is going to be revealed.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're going towards that. And I believe you were there when Stephen Bassett did his presentation.
Yeah.
So it's not a matter of years or months, it's just a matter of weeks or something like that. It's coming soon.
Yeah. So that's how I feel about it all. I mean, really.
Yeah. So fantastic. Yeah, absolutely.
That's kind of my story. I mean, we can get into the Tartaria stuff if you want, but that's the basics right there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's great. And I love this presentation when I saw it, and when you were given the presentation. So this is great. And the audience and the viewers are going to be very thrilled to watch this and be able to find you in the future wherever else you're going to be at, which we'll get into in a minute. But I'd like to take a quick break before we get into the Tartarian research, and we'll be right back. This is Beyond the Strange, and we're talking with Camille James Harman. We'll be right back right after this.
Thanks.
All right, so let's go ahead and just take a fiver.
Yeah.
Hey, this is Deb, and you're listening to Dave Cruz on Beyond the Strange Radio.
I warn you, this could scare you, as the sound bothers me to listen to. It has always haunted me. What you're about to hear is very disturbing indeed.
I've seen the Martians eat.
What in heaven's name is it?
I don't know. Beyond the Strange.
Have you ever looked skyward and pondered UFOs, aliens, time travel, alternate universes, and parallel dimensions? Want to explore paranormal activities, ghost hauntings, various cryptoids, such as Bigfoot, sea and lake monsters? Greetings, Beyonders. I'm author Casper Parks, and you are listening to Beyond the Strange with host Dave Cruz. Help spread the word by posting links in forums and social media. Available at Speaker.com, YouTube, and Google Hangouts.
thank you for joining us here at Beyond the Strange. My name is Dave Cruz. I'm your host, and we are speaking with Camille James Harman tonight. And the first part of the show, we went over the experiences of Camille, and it's very, very amazing what we've talked about as far as experiences and different alien species and UFOs and sightings and just amazing stuff. And this is really, really amazing. And thank you again, Camille, for being on the show. Really greatly appreciate it. And so really quick, I wanted to just go over Camille's bio real quick. And she is a UFO experiencer and actress, and soon moving to Los Angeles from New Orleans. She had her first UFO sighting and abduction, and she suspects, that her encounters began in childhood. She had hypnosis regression with Barbara Lamb and Yvonne Smith. They revealed that she had experiences with grays and insectoids. I just like to call them mantises, but I'm sure there's more than that one species. And the MILAB experience. She has moved with her husband, Jeff Harman, and they have one son, to Tucson, Arizona, and they lived there for 10 years. They had more sightings, and she continued her research, which she presented to MUFON. Then they moved back to Los Angeles in 2016, where Camille did resume her acting career, and her credits are but not limited to Shameless, Emmy Award, Shameless, of course, Lifetime movie, The Daughter's Deceit. She's been in musical videos, and she won Best Actress Awards for short films as Tiger Lily, or in Tiger Lily, I should say. And she has been in a new series about child trafficking called Vice Squad. I don't think we went over that, but that's pretty awesome. And she was also in the movie with oh God, I can't remember his name now.
Christian Bale.
Christian Bale. God, he's like one of my favorite actors too. With as Vice President, Dick Cheney, and amazing credits. And once again, I just want to say thank you again, Camille, for being on the show today.
You're welcome. Yes, it makes me nervous. I'm scheduled to be in this show called Vice Squad, not Vice movie, which I was already in, Vice Squad, which is going to be about child trafficking, which is my cause against, to fight that. So
wonderful.
If that really manifests, I'll be so excited. It's supposedly happening. I was casted in a while back. It's been delayed, and I'm really excited about it. I would play an assistant district attorney in that series.
Oh, great. Yeah, that would be amazing. And can't wait to see you in that. That would be pretty awesome indeed. So the second part of our show is going to be based on your research on the Tartarian Empire. And to go along with that, I've also did a little bit of my diggings, and I'd like to just start with a narrative real quick. Based on Tartaria, or Tartary, there's different ways of saying that. And it refers to a historical region in northern and central Asia, encompassing parts of what's known now as Russia, Mongolia, China, and Kazakhstan. The term Tartary has been used in different ways over time, but generally refers to a vast and diverse territory with a long and complex history. In recent years, there has been a growing interest in the alleged existence of a lost civilization or empire known as Tartary, which some have claimed was a highly advanced and technologically advanced society that was deliberately erased from history. Now, however, these claims are not supported by any credible evidence or historical records. They are largely considered to be part of conspiracy theory or a pseudo-historical movement. Some proponents of Tartarian Empire theory argue that this supposed civilization existed during the 18th and 19th centuries and was destroyed or erased from history by a coalition of European powers led by the British Empire. Now, there's a lot more about that, but I want to interject a couple of things here. So, with the Tartarian Empire, again, with some of the research that I've done, I've found that, and of course, thanks to you, it looks like giants were associated with the Tartarian Empire as well. And so, giants are typically portrayed as humanoid beings that are much larger and stronger than ordinary humans. They appear in many different cultures around the world, often as characters in myths, legends, and religious texts, sects, that whatever.
Oh,
In some cultures, right, both. Um, in some cultures, giants are depicted as the benevolent figures, while others are portrayed as malevolent and or dangerous. In Norse mythology, for example, giants are often seen as enemies of gods and the human race, while some Native American traditions, giants are referred to as wise and powerful beings. Now, once again, we have a lot more of that, but I want to get into the research that Camille has done. But along with the Tartarian Empire, one more little tidbit there, that the Tartarian Empire did have was a technically advanced, so they were also considered to be part of the free energy movement. And so, with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Camille, and let's get into this.
yeah. So I woke up to this subculture about a year and a half ago, and I was kind of late to the party because, like I said, I was in a religious period of my life where I dropped out of looking into alien stuff and paranormal stuff for a while. And this had been going on for a few years when I, you know, came to know about it. And to me, it was so interesting because I have a long history of being suspicious of powers and being a conspiracy theorist. And, I mean, I went to see David Icke in person in the mid 90s. And ever since then, I was down the rabbit hole. So I've always wondered about how much control there has been over the historical and why certain things don't seem to make sense when you look at them with your own eyes and then you read what you're told about them. You're like, I don't know about that story,
Right.
So
Mhm.
to me, it was a natural rabbit hole that I wanted to go down. And once I did, I could not stop. I just went all in. So I'll jump in here and show you what I found. And let me put my glasses on, see what I'm doing.
Sure.
But I, la, 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 la. All right. Can you see my slides?
Not seeing them right now. No. Uh-oh. Camille, you there? I don't see you. I don't know what happened. Let's see if I can bring up chat.
Did I mess up?
You disappeared there for a minute.
Okay, sorry. I was
That's all right.
Okay, let me do share screen and see if you can see my screen.
Okay.
Okay, now do you see the slides?
I see the slides, yes.
Oh, well, then we'll just go from here.
Perfect.
Okay. So I have here a photo of New Orleans back in the olden days. And this is an example of how this theory of Tartaria, which is an actual empire that was in Eastern Europe, into Russia, into China. It was very large, and it was on many maps back in the day before it was kind of suppressed. is linked with this free energy concept. So just to look at this photo, I'm from Louisiana. New Orleans is my home city. And do you see the buildings with all of the spires on top? Well,
Yes. Mhm.
yeah, that is part of this theory that the old people knew about free energy, how to pull energy from the ether and create electricity with it. And so
Mhm.
this photo is evidence of these. The whole street is lined with these buildings with these spires on top. So we'll get into that, but I just love
Okay.
this. It's from New Orleans in the 1800s.
It's gorgeous.
So we have a bunch of subcategories in this discussion of Tartaria, and basically it's presenting evidence for previous civilization resets. So they are saying there is evidence in the physical record of a universal civilization that was interactive all over the globe. And there are things that we can see that to that argument. Here's the list we're going to go into. But again, Tartaria is kind of a catch-all term for this actual empire that no longer exists. But what it symbolizes was that empire may have been the nexus point of an ancient culture that was very advanced. And when that culture was suppressed or destroyed by some kind of previous reset, they tried to erase the history of it. So that's why it's given the name Tartaria as a catch-all term. Okay. All right. So the empire appeared on maps into the hundreds. It was primarily Russia, China, Northern India, Eastern Europe, and we suspect it had influence all over the world. And the reason we say that is partially because of the similar architecture that was all over the world. So we'll get into that. Here's a map. Let's see, this screen is covering what I wrote here, but this is one of the old maps of Tartaria. You can look for these online. You go on Bing. Bing is a great resource. Just type in Tartaria maps and you'll get tons of them. Here's one from 1570 showing Tartaria right here. And then we get into the concept of universal symbols, right? So when you think of symbols having meaning, and then you look at they appear all over the world. So here's something as simple as what some would call the Star of David, or intersecting triangles, or a tetrahedron intersecting, if you put it into 3D. But these appear all over the world, this symbol, and they all have their different meanings. So was there something to that? Was there an actual physical object with that shape, like a UFO or a Merkaba vehicle or something that people were seeing and recording? We don't know. Here's another one. This is from an internet site, by the way, and I have a great list of that I can send to you guys if you want to email me, and I'll send you my list of favorite sites for this information. But here again, wheels in the sky. What were these wheels? Were they craft? Were they a plasma phenomenon? What was that? They're seen all over the world and recorded in the rock. So, I mean, I don't think it's the sun. The sun doesn't really look like that. So I think it was something else. Here's, again, an example of architecture where you have this recurring threes, this structure of three where there's a larger one in the center and two smaller ones on the sides. So what's up with that? We know about geometry and balance, and was that related to some kind of power or energy or symbolism? This is what's called the squatting man. You see this everywhere too, but scientists are able to create this in a lab with plasma. So was there a previous plasma event that made this appear in the sky when something interacted with Earth that caused a plasma event in the sky that was seen all over the world? And did it happen at the same time, or did it happen a few times and was recorded in various places? We don't know, but the electric universe theory goes into that very well. And then we get into what's called antiquitech, which is antique architecture, or architecture from antiquity that was technology built into the architecture. And you'll see these recurring features. One of my fathers, I had several fathers, one of them was an architect. So I'm really into architecture, and I used to work for him as a receptionist. And when you see this all over the world, repeated in the architecture. You see arches, domes, spires, octagons, columns,
I lost you, Camille. Are you there? Hello? Hello, hello. Camille, are you there? I am not seeing or hearing you.
Uh-oh.
Okay, can you see me now? Or hear
Yeah.
me? Okay, yeah, I lost you there again for a
Oh,
minute. That was
no.
really bizarre. We can go back if you want to. We were just talking about the plasma man.
Okay. That's so weird. I hope
I
that does.
know.
I hope it's not me doing something I'm not aware I'm doing.
Oh, it's okay. I mean, like I said, I can edit all this. So
Thank goodness, huh?
yeah,
Okay.
which I will be doing. So if you want to go back
So
and
here's
I
the
think
plasma man. Do you want me to just start over on this one?
we can go from here.
You can see it, right? You're seeing it?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to start this again. So ready?
Yes.
Okay. So here's a slide of what's called the squatting man. And you see this all over the world, this kind of stick figure with the two circles on the side and the arms outstretched. And what we know from science in the picture above is that you can create this image with plasma. So it's an electromagnetic property. And what we wonder is, were the ancient people seeing some kind of plasma event in our skies? Kind of like the Northern Lights, but more structured. Think of it that way. So what if we had an interacting cosmic body like a planet or something that caused this shape to appear in the sky and it was recorded in stone by ancient people? So antiquitech free energy refers to architectural elements in ancient buildings and not so ancient, recent buildings as well, where we speculate that these architectural themes may have been elements of a machine causing the buildings to be energized or capturing free energy and dispersing it into the ground, into the nearby water, or into the building itself and into the people that were inside the building. So you'll see these around the world, arches, for example, that are similar to a horseshoe magnet. Now, were these arches a portal? We have paintings from ancient history showing beings in chariots flying through the arches. So, does that indicate that the arch had a different purpose originally than just a big ornamental structure that people could parade through? There are domes all over the world in the architecture. And the inside of these domes have resonating cavities that seem to be very deliberately designed to hold frequencies. You'll also see these little spires on top, like in this slide. Was that an antenna capturing energy and bringing it down into the building? You see them on all three of the domes in this large picture. So we don't, there are some people who speculate that they used red mercury and gold in combination, which was symbolized, by the way, in the mythological figure of the griffin. The griffin seems to have symbolized the mixture of gold and mercury, which could have been a free energy alchemical device. Are spires and spires with these little knobs on them. Again, it's similar to what we find in some electromagnetic devices, like actual machines that we build now. You see these on the tops of churches and other buildings. Here's this shot again of New Orleans with the streetcars with all these spires on top of the buildings. What did they do? What do they know that we don't know now, that we're not using now? Also, you see octagon buildings. Now, sometimes these buildings were outside of other large structures and they housed what could be some kind of machinery inside here. So a lot of times these buildings were turned into other things as history unfolded, and they became bandstands, gazebos, baptismal areas. But what kind of energy was being harnessed or stored in these octagon-shaped buildings that we're not privy to now? Another feature were columns, and you see columns all over the world, again, with electromagnetic symbolism built into some of the ornamentation. And in India, they have columns that actually spin. That seems to be like a giant, that make the building like a giant machine of some kind.
Right.
Were the columns storing something? I mean, I'm not an electromagnetic engineer. I don't know how to explain all this very well, but there are people who do a good job of this that you could find on YouTube. And then there were star forts built all over the world. These cities were laid out in a pattern that had these beautiful star formations built into the ground with canals and waterways. Now, some people speculate this was just a defense idea, but some people speculate that they were capturing a certain kind of energy, and that it was charging the waterways and it was charging the land with some frequency related to the shape, like cymatics. And they're all over the place. And then you look at ancient sculpture, and these are marble. Now, how were they able to do this kind of intricate carving with power tools back in the day and get this kind of detail? Some people speculate that they had technology to possibly liquefy the stone and then harden it, like they could work with it in a liquid state. Some people speculate they were able to petrify things. They were able to actually petrify people and objects, which is kind of scary. Like you cut those open, do you find bones or something? I don't know, but it's pretty wild. I don't know. Anyway, how come we don't have sculptors now who can do this? Seriously,
right.
All the power tools. Nobody can do this anymore. What did they know how to do back then that we can't do now?
Right.
And then you get into some geological anomalies. One of them is called mud floods. There are many buildings that have been found where if you dig them out, you'll find other layers of the building under meters of mud. And these are buildings that are not ancient. They're relatively what we've been told are recently constructed buildings. And yet they still have this buried lower floor effect. So I'll show some pictures of that example. So here's a building at street level, what we're told was street level, but when they dug down, they found another whole structure underneath with windows. So you can't just say it was a basement, because why would a basement have windows and doors? That's what we find. We find old windows and doors under buildings, but yet there's no record in the history of the area of any kind of immense flood that would have caused that kind of, raising of the ground level, where what could have done that? Could that have been a cosmic event that caused massive mud flooding or liquefaction? Or we don't know. I mean, if they don't even write about it, then how are we going to know? It's like it was hidden history.
Yeah.
And then you get into cliff dwellings or melted buildings. We're told a lot of these ancient buildings that are built into rock were carved into the rock. But again, what if it was a building that was hit with some kind of energy, like a plasma event, a directed energy weapon from ancient beings that knew how to, fight wars with weird weapons, aliens? Did it come from below the earth? Was it an event in the earth that came upward into the building and heated it? Or was it something that came from the above down and heated the building? So there's that. And here's an example of cliff dwellings. Like this thing right here, is this just a normal mountain structure, or was this a city that got blasted with some kind of heat source?
Sure.
Here's another example of, they just say, oh, this was just carved into the rock. It's like, well, maybe it was a nice big building and then it got zapped with something. And you can't unsee these images once you think of them a little bit differently. Some people have been further. They talk about ancient mines ancient forest, like a much larger scale situation on Earth, which is called alternative geology. Like I say, what is the Grand Canyon? Some people think the Grand Canyon was made by a plasma beam that hit the Earth and like blasted it. And you can see this on Mars too. You can see these giant canyons that look like almost like a lightning bolt pattern, like they were hit with some kind of electricity that scarred the Earth. And then that caused the erosion over time. Or some people think these are ancient mines that were mined by giant creatures from another time and another, technology. Devil's Tower. Okay, here's, the Grand Canyon.
Yes.
Here's some example of called mesas, right?
Yes.
Or mountains that look very similar to giant tree stumps. Like how did this mesa come to be where it has a nice flat top and this graduated side? They say it was an intrusion. Well, I don't know. Or you'll have these mountains that look like, a tree that was broken off. So that's kind of the more extreme end of this, but it's interesting. Like Devil's Tower, Wyoming, they say is a giant tree stump.
That's intriguing.
Yeah. Here's another thing too. They say that a lot of mountains that look like are actually ancient giants that laid down and were petrified. I know that sounds crazy, but there's some people who've put together some images of these all over the world and giant faces in the mountains and other things where they suggest that just like we had ancient dinosaurs walking around, allegedly, that were gigantic.
Yes.
Now we have little tiny lizards in our yard. Maybe we had giant humans of some kind walking around, and the Earth had a different gravity, or it had a different structure, and it supported a different kind of life that was on a massive scale that we just have no clue that is real now. So yeah, there are the giants that we read about, where they're just a little bit bigger than humans. But then there's like this theory that there were really super, super huge creatures. I know it's really out there. Then we get into giants. So you have artifacts, you have ancient weaponry that's gigantic. You have ancient doors that are gigantic. You have a lot of artifacts that seem to have been made for people that were not our size, and they're all over the world. You have giant structures like ruins in Malta and South America and the pyramids, and where you wonder, like, who built this? Were there giants back then? Giant steps. And here's the structures in Malta, and their legend actually says it was built by a giantess. Here are some paintings from America where you see giant Native Americans living in North America. Here is a story from recently in Afghanistan where allegedly our military found a giant living in a cave and battled it. And it was terrifying to them.
I remember hearing about that.
So the giant of Kandahar, if you want to research that. So some people think giants still live underground and hidden. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. And then the 1880s was a really weird time. Okay. So we had a lot, like the whole steampunk thing came out of that too, as well, which I find very interesting. But you had an inordinate number of orphans, first of all, even in the literature. Like think of Charles Dickens, think of all of these stories about orphans that came out of the 1800s. And you also had a huge amount of insane asylums and people being put into insane asylums. And then we'll get into some other weird things, but here's an example of orphans. And there were these things in America called the orphan trains. It says between 1854 and 1923, 250,000 children were shipped around the United States to work in the fields and factories. And here's an example, again, of a very old and ornate building in Indiana with this Tartarian architecture. And, you have these children, like, what happened? What happened to the parents? Why were there all these children all of a sudden being shipped all over the world? They were shipping them from Europe too. So, like, was it just famine? Was it just war? Was it disease? It just seems a little fishy. Here are some other examples of the insane asylums. They had these big castle-like insane asylums in the United States when they had very small population bases in the areas they were serving. and also in Europe. So here I copied this. In England in 1808, the government authorized the building of 20 insane asylums to house the mentally ill. By the end of the 1800s, there were more than 120 asylums housing around 100,000 people. Here's an example of one of these giant buildings called the Longview Asylum in Cincinnati, Ohio. Like, why do they need all these insane asylums? One thing I speculate is there was an event that was catastrophic that caused the mud floods, and that it made people go crazy, and that the controllers, let's just call them the Illuminati or whatever, wanted to reshape the narrative, create a new history of the world, and they institutionalized people that wouldn't go along with the new narrative, and they took their children and reassigned them to other households where they could be indoctrinated with the new version of reality. That's one theory, and we see that happening now with mass hysteria, mass insanity, and the state trying to separate children from their parents. It's a real huge problem. Okay, and then there was another thing going on in France, which is really weird, called the Cabbage Patch Babies. Not the ones from the 1980s that were sold in stores, but this phenomenon in Paris of these postcards depicting children for sale, children being delivered by the postman, children growing in cabbage patches. And in some of the artwork, they reference a clock with the like a cuckoo clock with the weights stopped or disconnected, almost like they stopped time, which is really, it's full of weird symbolism. And one of the first films ever made was about the Cabbage Patch Babies. And this guy, Mind Unveiled on YouTube, has some really great videos. Mind Unveiled on YouTube has really great YouTube videos about this whole Cabbage Patch Baby phenomenon. What he's suggesting is that there may have actually been a cloning center of some kind going on. And
Interesting.
I know it sounds crazy, but if you watch his videos, it makes you go, who knows? Who knows? All right. And then we had the World's Fairs all over the place. So in the late 1800s, early 1900s, there were all these extravagant World's Fairs that were temporary. And we're told they built these amazing cities and buildings and canals in this record time, when some people speculate maybe those buildings were always there and we were just told they were built for the fair, because it doesn't make sense that they were able to build them in that short of a time.
Right.
And then they were like re-indoctrinating the public about history and things. And they also had electricity lighting these things up incredibly. And, this was all during the time of Tesla, and fair suspect because they were like talking about race stuff, and it was very white supremacist, and they had infantoriums, they had babies for sale, they had invented these like incubators that they could put premature babies, save them, but then they had them on display at the World's Fairs, and they were selling babies to people that had been coming out of these incubators. And here's some examples of that, the infantoriums at the World. So what is up with that? What's up with the temporary fairs all over the place and the incredible architecture at those fairs? See, some people speculate that America had all this architecture already here. And when they came and settled America, there's codes in the words like cities were founded, right? And you have like, what do they mean founded? Do they literally mean found and cleaned up and dug out? And then the people said, oh, we built the city, but really they just found it and cleaned it up and wrote a whole fake history for it. I know that sounds really crazy, but there's some interesting information on that in this Tartaria research. Also, that's where the term whitewashing comes from. Did you know that? That they would have dug out these buildings and just cleaned them up and spray painted them all white. And they did this with the World's Fairs buildings. So
that's the first I've heard of it.
They would all look the same. Also, when you look at the word Freemason, right? Masons. Well, what does Freemason mean? Free as in a free person, or does it mean free masonry? Like masonry you just found and cleaned off and said you built it, but really it's old and you're rediscovering it. So, I mean, these are just, I know it's very controversial, obviously. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if any of this is real. Just telling you. And sometimes I wonder if this whole subject has been created by AI as a big psyop on us.
Hmm.
Like, what if someone just introduced this concept to trick us all? Like, or is
It's
it real?
fascinating though. I mean,
You know?
it's very fascinating.
Yeah.
It's something that I just started learning about myself.
Well, when you see how crazy the world is right now, do we have a collective unconscious memory of being tricked in the past and having our narrative rewritten? Because it seems
Mhm.
like that's what they're trying to do right now.
Which could be related to the whole Mandela effect as well.
Yeah. So, all right, am I back?
Yes.
Okay, that's the end of that show. But I just I and people look into it. It's pretty fascinating. There's one video I have a YouTube playlist too called Tartaria on my YouTube channel, and you can go under there and look at videos. And there's one that this guy did about the city of San Francisco, which I just visited when I was up there, for the
Yeah.
UFO con. And it
Mhm.
was so beautiful. The old buildings, City Hall was just this magnificent thing.
Yeah.
And it made you think, because he said, look at these early paintings from San Francisco, which we're told grew up because of the gold rush, right? He's like, but the gold rush was really in the mountains to the east of it. It wasn't in the city. And when you look at the timeline of this art of old Francisco into how it increased through lithography and then into the photographic record, he said, you're looking at like this really short window of time, 30 years, where this monstrosity of a city magically appears. And with like serious architecture that would have required serious craftsmen over a long period of time.
Right.
And you're shown this like collapsed timeline of improbability. It's like, when you really think about it, like, did the population support the building of such a magnificent city in that short time frame? And there are people doing the same analysis in Australia. They're saying, look, here's the record of the ships of people that were coming over from England, right?
Mhm.
I mean, we're a colony country that was built
Right.
by, whatever. And they said that the people coming over and the building materials coming over and the skill sets coming over does not match the architecture that we're told was built in this time frame. It just doesn't. It's physically impossible. So it makes you wonder, like, was there an ancient empire of buildings all over the world that had these columns and domes and spires and all this stuff? And did something happen? And a lot of people died. And then were we told, this whole other story of the world? Like, how do we know?
Yep. Very, very interesting. Very intriguing. All of the words above. I mean, this is just amazing and fascinating data that's being collected. And you're right about San Francisco because, well, I've lived up here all my life and the Bay Area, and I go back, to visit San Francisco once in a while, and I go to Fisherman's Wharf. I don't know if you got a chance to go there or not. Oh, you got to come back and visit. There is amazing structures along the water. The wharfs themselves, the buildings that house all these ships and everything. You want to talk about giant buildings. These buildings are huge, amazingly huge. And there's also buildings on the wharf where there's one that's that holds all of these ancient, and I mean ancient because they're old. A lot of these old like arcade type games
Mm-hmm.
That they're all mechanical or steampunk, like you mentioned. So you got to come back and visit that. I'm serious. You'll be amazed at everything there.
Yeah. So it just makes you wonder, like, are we having a collective unconscious memory of this drama happening in the past that we're being triggered now? We're like, oh my God, they're about to do it again. There's something in my soul that knows we're under attack, right? Like we're going through a forced reset of some kind. And we see it happening sociologically and economically and
Yes.
all of that. But is it going to escalate to something physical, like catastrophic physical? I don't know. But then when you look at the holographic universe theory and simulation theory and all the AI, and then you wonder, like, are we being played? Like what is real and what is manipulation and what is a psyop and what is real? But certainly it's being suggested in a lot of fictional movies and television too, this idea of things are not what they seem. So a lot of times they will put that stuff into the movies and TV, this predictive programming, to
Talk about all the time.
to awaken people or to show their evil plans before they do them, which is the other thing. So you get me.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So it's beyond the strange. I mean, what the hell is going on?
Beyond strange. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I've talked about predictive programming for years, and I've had a couple guests talk about it as well. But yeah, I definitely believe. Why would they do that? I don't know why they would actually tell us their plans before they did it. Maybe because
it's supposedly a spiritual rule. Like even if you're going to do evil, even if you're going to do something evil, if you tell the people before you do it, it contractually frees you from guilt.
Right.
That's what I've heard.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. I did hear about that. That's right. And I've put out my theories and stuff out there in the show as well. Like when they're doing the series with the whole Marvel series, and they were doing the Avengers series. You had Endgame, where they talk, with half the population of the universe just disappears, and then you go back to the Georgia Guidestones, and it talks about population control.
Oh, yeah.
Then right after Endgame, you have the whole pandemic with COVID.
Yes. And the other things that went on with COVID. And you look at the Deagle military statistics table where they had projected the population being lower in 2025, I believe it was. It was like, why? How did you know that? There are all these weird things. So are we being exterminated? Are we being prepared for a cosmic event? Why are these people trying to exterminate us? And what do they know something that's about to happen where they want a smaller population to deal with some future cataclysm that's coming? Or
Who knows?
Trying to engineer a biblical end times? Like,
well, we have Project Bluebeam that's supposedly still on the horizon. Well, it's been in the works for decades already.
Right.
So
were they going to use a fake alien invasion to scare us all into one world government, just like at the movie Independence Day?
Yep. Right.
So it makes you wonder, like, if the aliens start showing up, are they real aliens or projected aliens, or are they craft that the government built? And when I say government, it's not just the US, it's like a whole worldwide conspiracy. So it's going to be very hard for us to discern reality, it feels like, in the very near future.
Well, let me put this out there.
Stay positive and be aware and fight tyranny and just pray. I don't know.
Absolutely. Pray. Well, let me just put this out there, Camille. We've been in this genre, circles, whatever you want to call it. We have this information. We've known this information for a long time. Anybody who's been in ufology for a while, we know that they've been here. They're already here. They've intermingled into our society. There's talk about indigo children. There's talk about hybrids. There's talk about you've even had the experience yourself where it's possible that they may have had used your own, children.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. We still don't know. And that's why we keep digging, because we want to get the answers.
Right.
But we already know that they're here. So for let's say government disclosure to happen and to say, oh, we're being invaded, we already know they're here. So whatever's coming or whatever they're telling us is not entirely true. That's where I'm coming from.
I would distrust whatever they're telling us, because they're still going to use whatever they say as a control mechanism. Governments are not about freedom. They're about control. That's the nature. And so the individual is going to have to become more finely attuned to discern things. And that's so challenging, but that's really a huge part of how we deal with what seems to be coming.
Exactly. And I think we could probably close with this. I mean, you know, we need to be vigilant. We need to be discerning. We all have our own empathic abilities that has been given to us. I feel that you are also. I don't know if you felt that or not, but I feel that you are.
I'm working on it. I'm working on it. I don't wave that flag. I don't say I'm psychic at all. But
Right.
I see patterns. I'm good at pattern recognition and symbols and putting things together, but I don't,
Yeah.
get obvious information from above.
Yeah. I mean, I've had you know, psychics and mediums that I've talked to in the past and even today tell me how empathic I am, you know, and intuitive.
Intuitive.
So you know, that's why I say I think we all have our own abilities, and that's why we talk amongst ourselves, because you know, other people don't get it or they don't want
Yeah.
to.
Well, it's a very personal thing. This whole, I have family members who just think I'm crazy, and I have other family members that get me, and same with friends. And you just have to remain true to your, you know, your feelings and your I mean, it's a combination of the intellect and the feelings. And my beliefs do change. I reserve the right to change my beliefs
Sure.
as I get more information. I mean, we all do. That's called freedom. And I'm all about freedom and the Constitution and things like that. So when
Absolutely.
in doubt, I pray and I root for freedom over tyranny. And the rest, I mean, we're going through psyops on multiple levels, for one thing.
Yes. I totally agree with that. Totally agree with that. Well, I'd like to say thank you once again for
You're
being on
welcome.
the show.
It
And
was fun.
if you,
Thank you.
this was amazing. I had a great time. And if you can please let everyone know where they can find you and everything that's you.
Well, I'm on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram. If you go to my website, CamilleJamesHarman.com, it has links to all of those things. And you can also email me through my website if you want. I do have a list. I've created a document, a PDF of my favorite Tartaria links to Instagram, YouTube, and all that. So if you want to look into that more and you want a little shortcut version of who to follow and who to watch, there's some great Facebook groups, for instance. Then you can shoot me an email and I can send that to you.
Fantastic. And I'm sure that if they want to find you at any other events that are coming up, just to go to the website.
I would probably, like, events where I'm be speaking about UFOs or stuff, I'll probably just keep my Twitter.
Okay.
And I kind of mix my acting and UFO stuff there for some reason. I don't know how safe that is. I told my managers and my agents, I said, I'm going to start talking about aliens again, so you're going to have to deal. And they said, okay. I said, look, there's enough craziness in the world. If Hollywood wants to say they're so diverse, then they're going to have to deal with me. So,
There you go.
I mean, diversity, let's have a test on that.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
I think you'll be fine. And once again, I just want to say thank you again for being on the show. And yeah, this was fantastic. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Dave. All right.
Camille
Bye-bye.
James Harman, everyone. This is a fantastic show. And I just want to thank you for being here to listen and to watch. And remember, just stay safe, but always stay strange. And hasta.